This is how I met Jayne. That's my leg sticking out of that car. Jayne had been driving along the road and had a very, very significant car accident. This is the scene that I approached as we drove up to the incident. Obviously you can see that this is a significant car crash. But walking into that scene, I had to look after my own safety. You can see that there's power lines. There's actually 2 sets of power lines across there, and there was also 2 sets across the road. I had to make a decision about whether it was safe to enter that scene, but also knowing that there's people trapped or dying in those cars. Unfortunately, the gentleman in this car passed away, probably not on impact, but probably lying on the ground, thrown out through the passenger side. Usually, or probably this incident was probably just down to some simple inattention. Someone driving through a giveaway sign, not looking, not concentrating on what was happening, and impacted not only his life, but Jayne's as well. I spent about 45 minutes in the car with Jayne. Jayne doesn't remember me being there. She doesn't actually remember the incident. She's one of the luckiest people alive. She'll probably say a few different things tonight about how it's affected her life. But when I looked at Jayne in the car, I thought, wow, you look amazingly uninjured. I don't know how we thought that she was uninjured, but we did. She was talking, she was complaining of some pain. Her obs and vital signs were all normal. And from looking at the outside of her, the really only thing she was complaining about was some neck pain. But given the incidents, we took a long time to get her out of the car to make sure it was done safely. And lucky we did, because that is one of Jayne's injuries. That is an unsurvivable injury. Jayne shouldn't be here. You'll see on the far side of normal spinal column, this is right up high in your neck. That fracture would kill, I think, 99.9% of people. It would just sever your spinal cord and you would be dead. Amazingly, Jayne is alive, and Jayne's here to tell her story tonight.
I'm glad I can't see you all. Who was I? I was a wife, I was the mum of Claudia and Cooper, a daughter, a sister, and a friend and a work colleague. I worked 4 days a week with Greater City of Shepparton, which I'd been there since I'd been 18 years of age. I was a very independent person. I loved holidaying, socialising, and playing practical jokes, especially on my work colleagues. The day of our collision was Monday, November 30th, 2:15. The sun was shining and Cooper and I were travelling into work and school on the Katandra main road. The car was full of Christmas decorations, ready to decorate the office and drive my teammates crazy, which I love to do. We were planning our leave at Christmas time as a family. We were having a beach holiday with friends. Both Cooper and myself were in really happy and in great spirits. We waved to a friend who was milking his cows, and in a split second, my life, my family's life, was about to change forever. The accident. I have no memory of the accident for the next 10 to 14 days, so this is what I've been told. Cooper remembers seeing the other car and saying to me that it wasn't going to stop. He said that I've screamed and I've pulled the wheel to the right, which actually has saved our lives. The impact hit the right-hand front wheel rather than my driver's side. It caused us to flip and roll about 50 metres and we landed upside down in a table drain. Cooper came to and he climbed out the back broken window. I was strapped into my seatbelt and I was hanging upside down. Power lines covered the road. Cooper has diverted a farmer on his tractor and he's waved down the next car, who rang 000 but also knew us. The first emergency services to arrive was our local fire brigade, and they too knew us both. When Cooper has come back to me, I had undone my seatbelt and I was trying to get out, but my legs were stuck and I was lying on the roof of my car. My husband arrived, who was an intensive care nurse, and stayed with me until the ambulance arrived. Everyone at the scene had to witness not only my distress, and apparently I was doing quite a lot of swearing. Typical. But the fact the younger driver had been thrown straight through his windscreen and he was lying dead in the paddock. Seeing this has changed Cooper forever, and this is something he cannot unsee, and I'm just really thankful that I actually have no memory of this. I was treated at the scene by paramedics and I was flown by air ambulance helicopter to the Alfred hospital. My daughter Claudia was waiting with my sister. Cooper was taken to the GV Health Hospital and Grant stayed with Cooper to be monitored and x-rayed. He had concussion, damage to his right hip, which he still has regular physio for. The Shepparton emergency services were fabulous. How Cooper didn't sustain any other physical injuries, considering the speed of both the vehicles, is amazing. Cooper was quickly supported that day by friends and family. My injuries. I had a fractured 2C, spinal injury or broken neck, and this is called the hangman's loose. So normally, if I'd been up the right way, I wouldn't have survived because my airways would have been also blocked, but I was upside down. I had a fractured nose, I had a fractured right cheekbone, I had a lacerated tongue, I had a fractured sternum in 2 spots, I had 15 broken ribs back and front, I had a right fracture in my ball and socket of my hip, and my right kneecap was halfway up my thigh, I had a broken lower 2 or L2 broken back, my pelvis was broken in 4 places, I had contusions to my lungs and heart, 2 bleeds on the brain, 1 bleed in the brain, and my right shoulder has suffered quite a lot of damage. I spent a week in the critical care unit where a spinal halo and traction was bolted into my head. I have in 4 places, and the bolts went in 1.5 centimetres in depth. I now have 4 prominent holes in my head. The traction held 7 kilos of weight, pulling my neck back to align it and protecting my spinal cord. I was laying flat on my back for the next how many weeks, and this was the best chance that they thought that I would have of healing. Apparently when the holes were being drilled into my head, the pain that I was suffering was so horrific that the nurses were also in tears. Thank God I don't remember that. I had a nasal gastric tube inserted to feed me. Every 4 hours, the team of staff, whoever was available, and this included the orderly, the kitchen staff and nurses, would come together as a team. They were called the rollers. They'd work together to hold me. They'd undo the traction. They would roll me over, where they would wash me, apply creams so I didn't get bird sores. They do toileting. I had absolutely no dignity. And this would actually release some of the pain. By being moved, my pain would then move to another area, so it'd give some relief. At this stage, the specialists were actually unsure if I was even going to survive the week. So from now on, I absolutely remember everything, the pain and what is happening to me. I went from ICU to critical trauma ward until the 23rd December. I was placed in a chest halo from the spinal halo, so the traction was removed. Within 24 hours of this occurring, I had to go back into the traction again, which was like hell, because I'd lost all circulation and movement in my right arm. On a day, a couple of brilliant staff asked if I'd like to go outside. The sun was shining while they had their lunch break, and they wheeled me out. And that was one of the best feelings. I still remember that day and that sun on my legs. I'd often lay in silence, watching my world, or watching the roof, and then thinking about how my family was falling apart, how Grant was keeping it together, managing the children, the family finances, taking permanent leave from work to be with me every day. My fabulous parents and in-laws helped with keeping some sort of order for Cooper once school went back. Cooper had been left and I was feeling really guilty. Claudia was starting her 2nd year of uni, and she should have been concentrating on her life and not mine. I was constantly wheeled back and forth to x-rays, CTs, prodded and poked by doctors, and I had so many visitors and messages, thank God, or I don't know if I would have got through. On the 23rd of December, the chest brace was removed again, and they made me, within probably an hour of this happening, so I still had the halo on, I was made to sit up. I had nausea, I had vomiting, I had dizziness. I don't know how I'm going to do this. The bed was slightly elevated, and finally I could actually see where I was, or what was around me. On Christmas Eve, there was no mucking around, I was transferred to the Epworth Richmond rehab team, brain injury ward. I was introduced immediately to my new support team of doctors, specialists, physios, occupational therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, speech therapy, and a caseworker. This team became my rock. Within an hour or two of arriving at the two physios were in my room, and they were getting me up and getting me to balance on a frame with only one leg bearing weight as that hip was broken. I'd say this was another really tough moment. I felt sick and everything hurt. I really couldn't see any end to this pain. Christmas Day, my beautiful children and my husband came to visit me, and they brought me lunch and spent the day with me. So did my parents, my brother and sister and their families, my brother-in-law and his wife and children. It was still a really lovely day with lots of messages. Boxing Day. Physio began in the gym. It was very confronting to see other patients, younger and worse off than me, multiple facial injuries and scarring, severe head injuries. They couldn't talk and walk on their own. And then it's when I realised I was the lucky one. They were so young, and they were all victims or they were culprits of road trauma. My daily routine was being toileted, showered each day, as I couldn't do this myself. Clothing was really difficult to find, and I had to fit over my halo brace, so a lot of oversized shirts and certainly not fashionable. I certainly wasn't rocking any hot lycra outfits at the gym. My sister-in-law, Sue, made me some special nighties to accommodate the halo. I soon realised I didn't like my physio. He was a guy. That's okay. He was very well known and respected, but he was tough. And I soon realised it didn't matter if I had a migraine, I was vomiting and I was in pain, he made me do my rehab, regardless. No sympathy here. I was very grateful to hear that he was actually going to have 4 weeks leave and I didn't have to put up with him. The girls were a bit softer. I also realised the quicker that I did the gym session, the quicker I got the hell out of there and I got back to the bed. Every 2 weeks I was transferred back by ambulance to the Alfred, where I would have been showered by a family member. So I was only having a shower every 2 weeks. It's bliss. They would wash my hair, then they would remove all the wool that was in my padding of the brace, and then the next step, I had no idea when this was going to happen, that this would then occur every 2 weeks. They got like a wrench-like tool and they began to tighten all the bolts in my head until they wouldn't tighten any further. The pain was horrific, the pressure was unbelievable, and I felt that my head was in a vice. I would then be nauseated, I'd be vomiting, and I'd have a pumping headache, which often lasts for 24 hours to 48 hours. But it didn't matter. Physio still happened every day regardless of how I was feeling. I think this is when my depression set in and the days were difficult and they were long. And I did not know how I could do this. I was still needing to be showered, toileted and dressed, and even to have someone to shave my armpits and my legs. I felt hopeless. I'm so thankful for my amazing husband and my amazing, beautiful children for all their love, support while their lives were put on hold. My amazing parents and in-laws for all the visits and the support that they gave, and my amazing extended family and my beautiful, supportive and caring friends. This helped me to get through the dark days. Facebook messages were amazing, and I couldn't wait to look on the phone when my husband finally let me get a phone again to see what had been sent through to me. I celebrated Christmas Day, Boxing Day, my 47th birthday, New Year's Eve, Australia Day and Valentine's Day, all in hospital, while my friends were out camping and holidaying, having a great time. I should have been there. In February, I was allowed to go home on a weekend leave to see how I'd cope, and of course how Grant and the kids would cope. I was apprehensive. Could I even get into the car with this goddamn halo on my head? It was a long trip, and while I was at home, I asked to go to the scene of the collision. To try and understand it, I guess. I had no recollection, and it meant absolutely nothing to me. The Christmas decorations that I had in my car, however, were lying broken in the drain. The weekend was a success, apart from occasional crashing into the wall, because of course the walls at home, or the door frames at home, weren't as wide as the hospital, with allowing the halo to go through. I was allowed to be released the following week, a lot earlier than expected, but I'd had enough and I couldn't cope anymore, and I wanted to get home to Cooper. This is when reality set in very quickly. I felt unsafe, and I needed my trauma team. I'd been dependent on them for so long and very attached. All services were now transferred to my new fabulous team at the Golden Valley Health, which I still spend time with today. I had a daily visit every day from a nurse who would come and dress my holes in my head so that I didn't get infections. And that's when I finally realised I did have a significant head injury. Reality is checked, definitely. I couldn't follow simple directions or complete tasks. I would need to be told to shower, or that just wouldn't happen. I would have no recollection of simple conversations that we're having. I began to use a whiteboard, a phone message for reminders, a calendar and a diary, and I still do this today. I was very dependent on Grant for most things. My appointments then began in Shepparton, 3 times a week. When Grant wasn't home, Cooper, my son, who was 16 at the time, had no choice but to step up and help me get dressed and get ready for bed or in the morning, regardless if he wanted to. What 16-year-old should have to do that for their parent? 3 weeks later, my halo came off. What a relief. 7 kilos of weight was gone from my head. My head felt like a bowling ball, and I didn't know if my neck would actually cope with the weight. But due to my hard work, determination in rehab, I'd been successful enough that I had to go into a straight soft collar instead of a hard collar for 3 months. My neck is stable. I'm unable to do many physical activities, but I'm here. From this time until the end of July 2016, I was very reliant, being driven everywhere. I've lost 25% of my upper vision. At the end of July, I got a restricted licence and I was allowed to drive my new car, which has many modifications, only short trips. I don't trust anyone, and I still don't today. 20 months on, I still suffer from chronic fatigue. I need daily nano naps just to get through the day. Everything I do is planned around rest requirements, which is impounding my social life and being a mum. I have daily neck and shoulder pain, weekly migraines, but I'm still learning to listen to my body and manage my pain better. I have poor concentration, I have daily memory loss. I still use my whiteboard, my message board. My comprehension still suffers, and I find sometimes conversations difficult if there's more than one person involved. Physically, I have very minimal neck movement. I can only sort of move like this. I cannot lift my right arm above my shoulder, and I do require further surgery. Unfortunately, because my neck can't be flexed backwards, they don't know how they're going to do this if I need to be intubated, because they would snap my neck and sever my spine. So we are working on some way of doing that. I can't do things like cleaning the shower, hanging out the washing, gardening, etc. And I still only drive about 20 minutes at a time due to the pain and my arm aches. Because of the accident, holiday activities are really different. I can't go in the waves. If the waves knock me over, I'll break my neck. I wear a medical alert bracelet as I cannot have my neck tilted backwards. But if it's someone that's not medical trained that had to help me if something happened, I'd be stuffed. I need future operations, a right hip and a reconstruction, and a right shoulder. And now I no longer work, which was also terminated not very long ago from my current position. It's another loss caused by the accident. I'm glad that this happened to me at my age. I'm glad it didn't happen to Cooper, all these injuries. And I'm glad I wasn't in my 20s or my 30s. I wouldn't have been able to keep up with the social side of life, and I believe your friends won't hang around. They're too busy, they'll move on. I think about my injuries daily and how they will affect me in the future and how limiting my injuries will be with things that we'd like to do. Life now, yeah, I look normal person, but it's the daily pain and the movement that restricts me, that still impacts me with everything I do. So much of my independence has been lost, and I'm even unable to visit my daughter in Melbourne and spend quality time with her because I can't drive that far, and I certainly couldn't cope with the traffic because I can't move my neck quick enough, or can't move my neck at all, really. I still go to the gym, to a weekly physio session, weekly or fortnightly doctor's appointments, podiatrists, down to Melbourne monthly for specialists, brain and bone specialists. Grant has to drive me to these appointments because I can't drive that far, and we often need to stay over night because the 3 hours down and back certainly takes its toll on my husband. It's difficult watching my husband having to take on more chores and often feel hopeless and frustrated, and there's lots of tears which I help keep hidden from the outside world. Grant saves lives as an ICU nurse. He certainly didn't expect to have to help save mine that day. He kept our family together, and he's made us even stronger, and while having his own world turn upside down, he's been my rock. I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I'm alive and I have a life. It's just different. I want people of all ages to be accountable on the roads and stay safe. Make smart choices. Don't drive if you're fatigued. Don't speed. Don't use your phone. And allow time to get to your destination. I don't want your parents getting the knock on the door and being told that you're dead, or your friends are dead, or you're seriously injured. People say that I'm an inspiration, but I feel that I've just gotten on with what needed to be done. I was never going to lay there and feel sorry for myself. Life's really different now. I have a new normal that is very different to my old life. I know my future is full of happiness and love, and that I'm lucky to be alive. I was always the one saying that these things would not happen to me. I was a great driver. I'd never had an accident or a speeding fine, and I followed all the rules. This was not my choice or my fault. The other driver made a really bad decision and chose not to give way and obey the rules that day for whatever reasons. He's paid the ultimate price, and his family has, and they will never be the same, and neither will mine. Please just make the right choices. You only get one chance at life. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much.